Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be a recap on the adventures that had taken place in my Wednesday online campaign that I've been running. It's the Egyptian themed campaign. The party that had been messing around, that got hired to track down the starter of a disease in town that is linked to a curse, consists of the following characters: half-elf occultist, Yenris; dwarf alchemist, Belrin; barbarian orc, ranger human, Sauron; barbarian human, Drebin or Durbin; fighter gnome, Levart; human cleric, Elwick; human paladin, Irin. And when we take up the adventure, the beginning of the adventure, they had just finished fighting a bunch of brigands and they managed to take one of them alive. It is not the leader. Belrin made sure that the leader was a bloody mess at the end of that combat. So he had limited knowledge of what was going on, a few random rolls, and then the party speaks to him and then interrogates him following that. They ask him if they saw the guy that came out of town, what direction did he go in, so on and so forth. He saw the guy and he went into the necropolis area. The necropolis area is a pretty big area. There's lots of ruins and small mausoleums the size of tiny pyramids. There's a few noteworthy areas in there. The necropolis is about a mile and a half across by about a mile across the opposite way. Sits on the top of a few decent-sized hills, and there's a small valley between the hills. The party thanks him and makes him promise not to kill or steal from anyone ever again, and they failed their perception check on that. He definitely plans to steal from people again, but he looks at the life of being the brigand on the road being way too hazardous, especially with a party like this walking around the roads. So they let him go. They get to the necropolis, which was only a couple hours away, and then they camp because it's the beginning of dusk, but it's not quite, or it's a few hours away from nightfall, and they wait for nightfall. At a distance, they have an encounter, and an encounter is mostly what they see because it doesn't end up interacting with them. And they see some giant beetles, think the size of the actual car, come out from one of the small mausoleums and goes over in a direction and over one of the hills. Then they also see some mummies emerge out of one of the mausoleums and wander around. They avoid the mummies, and then they begin going to an actual big mausoleum. Belrin opens the door, and there's a spiked pit under it, and he manages to make his save to not fall in. And the pit was 12 feet down, and there was standing water and spikes in it. There was 11 zombies in the room. The party began combat, successfully knocking most of the zombies into the pit, or the cleric killing them with his channel. And that is roughly where the game ended, was them at the beginning of this mausoleum. but they are now inside. So that's what happened last game. There was a lot of time ate up by our descriptions and by our decision making, as well as the role play for the information. It was very entertaining. So the guys have to figure out where to go from here since they started exploring, after exploring the mausoleum, I would assume, and then decide if they want to interact with that giant statue they saw in between one of the hills in the valley. Think of something that's about 40 or 50 feet tall, made out of stone, walking. The party wants to avoid it as much as possible, and I don't blame them, but they might want to get closer to it. Who knows? I only put the world in front of them. They're the ones that make the decision of what they interact with. If this was entertaining, let me know. If this was helpful to my players, I hope so. Until we meet again.